Welcome to the Qasim Rashid Show, a civil rights lawyer here to expose all forms of injustice with a sprinkling of dad jokes in between. Here's your host, Qasim Rashid.
Good morning and peace be upon you this beautiful Sunday, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. My friends, thank you for tuning in once again. We've got a fantastic show lined up. We've got two amazing guests, Judge John Anderson running for appellate court in Illinois, and Senator Nabilah Islam Parks running for re-election in the swing state of Georgia. And we're talking everything from judicial reform to protecting Roe v. Wade to the horrifying stories coming out of Georgia of women dying due to lack of basic abortion healthcare access. I got an interesting note from someone saying that I talk too fast. And then somebody else sent me another note that says I'm talking too fast. And so I'm going to try to speak a little bit slower. And I got to be honest, it's a constructive criticism. By the way, those who gave me that feedback, I appreciate you, because you only gave the feedback because you listen and you care about the show. And so I appreciate every bit of it. And I will say, this has been constructive critiques I've received since I was, in elementary school. I don't know what it is, but I think it might be a middle child syndrome thing where you just got to get your word in edgewise because you don't have much time. But yeah, so point taken, and I will do my best. But we've got a lot to cover today. I'm going to bring on Senator Nabilah Islam Parks in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about the Republican Party going full-blown white supremacy. And I'm not even talking about stuff that happened 50 years ago or even 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. I'm not even talking about stuff that happened a year ago. I'm talking about just this last week in politics. These examples that I'm about to cite are not just like random, low-level Republican-level operatives. We're talking about the top of the party. And not only are they getting no pushback for these overt acts of racism and white supremacy, it's being celebrated. And the reason why this is so dangerous is because this puts our entire country at risk if this kind of racism is allowed to flourish. It's well documented what the anti-Haitian rhetoric is doing. It has swept the MAGA Republican Party. National political reporter for Spectrum News, a guy named Taylor Populars, I butchered that name, but he put together a comprehensive list of all the schools and healthcare facilities and social service facilities, even courthouses that were forced to shut down due to bomb threats emerging from Trump's anti-Haitian rhetoric and propaganda. Springfield, Ohio was even forced to cancel its annual culture festival. And the kicker is that before Trump went on stage against Kamala Harris and made his absurd remarks about eating the cats and eating the dogs, he was told unequivocally, hey, we vetted this, it's false. Don't say it, it's nonsense. And he said it anyway. We're talking elementary schools are being shut down because, as Governor DeWine of Ohio pointed out, they have received at least 33 bomb threats in the last week in the aftermath of Trump's lies about Haitian immigrants. Now, if you don't see the racism, the overt racism behind that, I'm not sure what to tell you. But the fact that they're doubling down on this, and J.D. Vance, admitted he's making up the story to draw more attention to the immigration crisis, is also bizarre. If it's a crisis, why do you have to make up stories to draw attention to it? Just talk about the crisis. But if you have to lie to talk about how bad something is, well, then either it's not that bad or you lack integrity or a combination thereof. Two, the racist slurs from right-wing media. This anti-Haitian hatred has painfully revealed the disparaging ways that right-wing media revels in describing Black people. Rich Lowry, on his interview with the Megyn Kelly show, exemplifies this point. Megyn Kelly, of course, has her own history of saying that Santa is white, and apparently Jesus is white too, and she was offended that a fictional character might not be white. I'm talking, of course, about Santa. But on her show, and Lowry, by the way, is the editor-in-chief of the National Review, which is one of the most right-wing racist publications out there. He referred to Haitian immigrants as Haitian N-words. Now, I listened to it a dozen times at least, and I put it in slow motion. I even put it through my auto caption software to see what it came up with. In every situation, he clearly says the N-word with the hard R. And you can go on my social media and see the clip for yourself. But the point is that not only was he comfortable saying this, him and Kelly just moved on in the interview as if nothing happened, laughing and joking. And there's been no backlash whatsoever for him, because that's where the Republican Party is today. I don't know if you caught the Senate hearing, and this is the third point, of Wadea al-Fayoum. Wadea al-Fayoum, if you recall, last year was murdered. He was a Palestinian Muslim child murdered by Joseph Kuzba, I'm sorry, who was a white guy radicalized by white supremacist rhetoric. And Kuzba stabbed this poor child to death dozens of times, just stabbed him to death. And at a Senate hearing about the anti-Muslim, anti-Arab hate that led to that hate crime, a woman named Dr. Maya Berry, an Arab American Muslim woman, was a witness. And Senator Kennedy of Louisiana asks her, "Do you support Hamas?" And she responds, "No, I do not. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization." And he responds, "You just can't get yourself to say that you don't support Hamas, can you?" And she goes, "No, I just said no, that I don't support Hamas." And she adds that it's disappointing that you would ask an Arab American Muslim woman such hateful questions. And Kennedy responds, "You should hide your head in a bag." That was his response. Senator Kennedy lied and accused an Arab American Muslim woman of being a terrorist sympathizer at a hearing about the murder of an Arab American Muslim child who was killed by a man radicalized with lies into thinking that American Muslims are terrorist sympathizers. And you should watch the full 5-minute clip. It is devastating bigotry, and this unhinged hate has consequences. As I mentioned, the murder of Wadea al-Fayoum was the result of Joseph Kuzba, a white man radicalized by white supremacist talking points against Arabs and Muslims. And Senator Kennedy, rather than recognizing that this is overt bigotry, engaged in that same overt bigotry and has faced zero consequences whatsoever for that racism and hate. And finally, you've probably seen Laura Loomer hanging around the Trump campaign. The Southern Poverty Law Center reports that Laura Loomer is, quote, an anti-Muslim bigot and conspiracy theorist who has collaborated with a range of hard-right political operatives, including Jack Posobiec, Mike Cernovich, Roger Stone, and Nick Fuentes, many of whom are, end quote, many of whom are self-identified white supremacists. But yet she's happily part of Donald Trump's presidential entourage, cozying up to the president while boasting with fellow white supremacist Nick Fuentes about, quote, taking over the Republican Party. Loomer also said about Kamala Harris becoming president that it would make the White House, quote, smell like curry, end quote, because of Harris's Indian heritage, of course. And then when asked directly about Loomer's racist anti-Indian bigotry, J.D. Vance, who himself is married to an Indian American woman, refused to condemn it. What is it with Republican men refusing to protect or defend their own wives? Right here, Usha Vance is facing overt bigotry and not defending her, by the way, Usha. I mean, she's complicit in enabling this. She's a grown woman and perfectly capable of speaking up for herself, and all she's done is side by J.D. Vance. But J.D. Vance won't side by her. And so here's overt anti-Indian bigotry, and he refused to condemn it. Ted Cruz, if you recall, Donald Trump insults his wife, calls her ugly, and next thing you know, he's endorsing Donald Trump. I don't understand these Republican men not having the courage. Is this the alpha male behavior we're told about? That this is what alpha men do? They stand by while their wives are insulted? Like, it's driving me nuts. But again, this is who they are. This is the white supremacy that has taken over the Republican Party, where the vice president and the president are engaging in overt white supremacy. And again, none of these examples are from decades ago. They're from literally hours ago. The Republican Party is now the MAGA party. It is openly the party of white supremacy. And finally, I'll close at this point before we go to break. And then when we come back, we'll bring on Senator Nabilah Islam Parks. If you don't believe me that the GOP has devolved into this party of white supremacy, I'm going to read an excerpt to you from a prominent Republican. He wrote this in 2012, before mainstream Trumpism took over the party. It was creeping at the time, but hadn't taken over the party just yet. This prominent Republican wrote back in 2012, quote, a significant part of Republican immigration policy centers on the possibility of deporting 12 million people or self-deporting them. Think about it. We conservatives rightly mistrust the government to efficiently administer business loans and regulate our food supply, yet we allegedly believe that it can deport millions of unregistered aliens. The notion fails to pass the laugh test. And then this person continues, this prominent Republican continues, the same can be said for too much of the party's platform. You can't nominate people like Sarah Palin who scare away swing voters. You can't actively alienate every growing block of the American electorate, blacks, Latinos, the youth. And you can't depend solely on the single shrinking block of the electorate, whites. And yet, 4 years later, I'm again forced to reflect on a party that nominated the worst kind of people like Richard Murdoch and tried to win an election by appealing only to white people, end quote. Now, this is a prominent Republican talking about how the Republican Party has become the party of white people. Can you guess who this prominent Republican is? It is none other than MAGA GOP vice presidential candidate Senator J.D. Vance, the same man who referred to Trump as America's Hitler prior to becoming a Trump sycophant himself. This is who's admitting that the Republican Party has become the party of white people. And look, I don't expect any politician or party to be perfect, but I do expect media to hold accountable those who engage in these overt acts of bigotry and racism and violence, as these above examples that I've mentioned demonstrate. I mean, literally kids are being taken out of school due to bomb threats because of this overt white supremacist violence. So for me, as I look at this, it's just shameful that legacy media continues to treat the Republican Party like it's some legitimate political organization and not the fascist cult that it has actually become. And this danger is real. It's increasing. The Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, they all report that white supremacy is statistically the greatest threat to American security today. And so the MAGA Republican Party's embrace of that white supremacist rhetoric only accelerates that threat to new levels, and we are all worse off for it. That's why I continue to raise the alarm and continue to ask folks to get active and organized and elect good people to office. And speaking of electing good people to office, when we come back from break, we're going to have Senator Nabilah Islam to talk about her race in Georgia. She's facing an uphill battle. She is in the least blue district in Georgia, at most at risk of flipping red. Governor Brian Kemp is actively targeting her race, so we got to get behind her. She only won by like 250 votes last time, just a sliver of a victory. And we got to make sure that we get behind her to ensure she gets reelected as well. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. When we come back, we'll have Senator Nabilah Islam Parks of Georgia. Do not go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I'm super excited to welcome back to the show Senator Nabilah Islam Parks. She's only going to be with us for a few minutes today because she, in addition to being an amazing public servant, she's also a mom to a new baby who is, she's doing this interview with her baby right now, which is just, it speaks how amazing she is and why we need to keep her in office. Senator Islam, thank you for being with us today.
No, thank you for having me. Yes, I have a 2-month-old, and he just woke up a few minutes before this interview, but we're still holding strong. So thanks for making the time to accommodate us.
No, I feel bad. I mean, you know, you're doing 19 different things at once, and here I am. Like, can you come on my show? But I appreciate you. You know, state senator of Senate District 7, and we're gonna have you on next week for a longer segment. But just really briefly, I wanted to get a lay of the land from you. Georgia is a swing state. You're running in one of the most competitive districts in Georgia. What should we know about what's happening in Georgia right now, and how can we support your reelection campaign?
So Georgia is a swing state. We see in the polls that it's neck and neck for the presidential. In 2020, we won the state with barely 12,000 votes. So it's going to be just as close this time around. And my district, Senate District 7, is a bellwether district because it's the only Senate district being targeted by the Republican Party right now and Governor Kemp. And so they've devoted millions of dollars to protect and flip 4 House seats and my Senate seat. So they're trying to increase the margins of Republican votes in districts like mine in order to flip the state red. So I am asking folks to volunteer, going to NabilahIslam.com to sign up, to donate as well. I was on maternity leave for a month, so I didn't get to do much in fundraising and trying to catch up here. But, we're confident with the support of our community and folks that, we should hopefully be able to keep this seat and make sure it stays blue.
And I was proud to support you last time. You have my full support this time as well. You guys are also facing some horrifying restrictions on reproductive rights, and it's led to the preventable death of mothers. Obviously, you're a mother yourself. Can you speak to what we can do outside of Georgia to support women in Georgia? What kind of action should we be taking right now?
So the 6-week abortion ban is extremely abhorrent in the way that it obviously restricts our access to reproductive health care. And the young 28-year-old woman that died, whose death was preventable, did not have to die, right? And it was Governor Brian Kemp's own community health board that made that assessment that this death was preventable.
Wow.
Yes. And so we are not safe in this state. It is extreme. We have one of the most strict abortion bans in the entire country. And we are, there's, I don't know off the top of my head, but there's certain groups within the state of Georgia that help women, find, if they're pregnant after 6 weeks, because most women don't even know that they're pregnant after 6 weeks anyways.
Exactly.
And they will help them find an appointment elsewhere, out of state. So abortion groups right now in Georgia are fundamental in funding and donating to. And, we need to restore abortion rights. I cannot say that more clear. We need a Democratic governor in 2026. This is just, it's really sad where this has gotten to, because it didn't have to be this way. And now we're suffering because, Donald Trump appointed some MAGA right-wing Supreme Court justices that did not uphold our fundamental freedom to abortion rights.
Senator Islam Parks, I can hear that adorable baby in the background, so I'll let you go at the 5-minute mark. But real quickly before you go in, and we'll have you on longer for next week's show, how can folks support your campaign, and how can they contribute and get involved to make sure we reelect you to the Georgia State Senate?
NabilahIslam.com, NabilahIslam.com. Please donate. Please sign up to volunteer. Please tell your friends that live in Duluth, Peachtree Corners, Berkeley Lake, Suwanee, Norcross, and Lawrenceville to vote for my campaign. I just got married, last year. So my name on the ballot is Nabilah Islam Parks.
You guys know I believe in separation of religion and state, but this is the one time I will tell you to vote for Islam. Because we need to vote. Our salvation depends on voting for Islam. This is the one time I can say it and not violate my rule against mixing religion and state. Senator Islam Parks, thank you so much for being with us. Take care of that adorable baby, and we'll see you back on here next week.
Okay, sounds good.
That was Senator Nabilah Islam Parks, and you guys just check out her website, NabilahIslam.com. She is really a fighter. She has worked in the political advocacy space for well over a decade. I mean, she's young. She's not an oldie like me. She's young. She started working early in her early 20s. She's been at this for well over a decade, and her success is powerful. It's inspiring because what she's done in a state like Georgia is really change the narrative, be able to demonstrate that Democrats can win in traditionally red states by focusing on the issues that matter, by focusing on things like economic justice, on reproductive health, by bringing together a coalition of voters, Republicans and Democrats, who reject MAGA extremism for the common cause of uplifting communities. And she wasn't supposed to win her primary. She won that. She wasn't supposed to win her general. She won that. And she did it without taking corporate money. That's the other part that I love about her principles. She doesn't take corporate money. She is fully funded by we the people. And that's why it's so critical that we step up. I'm going to go on and make a donation to her campaign. I hope you guys do as well. And at the end of the day, electing people like her, and later on in the show, we'll have Judge John Anderson. This is how we strengthen our democracy. I know a lot of folks are devastated, could be the right word, at the direction that our country is going. But I also want you to maintain hope that there are really good people out there. And these are the kind of folks that I'm trying to bring on here for you to see them firsthand and hear from them firsthand. But until and unless we get active and organized, we're not going to be able to bring about meaningful progress. Speaking of getting active and organized, before we bring on Judge John Anderson, I want to bring on, I want to talk about something really critical about Israel and Palestine. Recently, just last week, the Israeli government admitted that it killed 3 more Israeli hostages. Let me say that again. The Israeli military admitted that it killed 3 more Israeli hostages. Now, what we've said since day one is that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire and release of all hostages. I've said that since day one, since October 7th. Since before October 7th, I've been talking about an end to the occupation, an end to the siege on Gaza, the blockade on Gaza. And now the Israeli military admits that in its indiscriminate bombing last November, it killed 3 hostages, 3 of its own hostages. And the lack of media access from Netanyahu has prevented this information from coming to light or from holding accountable those responsible for these crimes. The AP reported that the Israeli military said that there was a high probability that the 3 hostages found dead months ago were killed in an Israeli strike. The army announced the conclusions of its investigations into the deaths of Corporal Nick Beezer, Sergeant Ron Sherman, and Ilya Tolendano. Now, this isn't the first time that the Israeli military has killed Israeli hostages. If you recall, on December 15th of last year, the Israeli military killed hostages Alan Shamriz, Yotam Haim, and Samer Talalka. And they killed these 3 hostages while they were trying to escape, waving white flags and SOS signals. And despite that, they were shot dead on the spot. And again, because Netanyahu has banned all Western journalists from Gaza and has killed more than 100 journalists in Gaza, it's impossible to know the actual extent of hostages killed by the Israeli military's incessant bombing. But here's the thing. It was a killing of these hostages by the Israeli military that the Israeli government used as justification to keep bombing. So just think about how absurd this is. The military killed its own hostages and then blamed Palestinians and said, now we need to bomb Palestinians for the hostages that later they admitted that they killed. Where is the outrage against Netanyahu over the killing of these hostages? And by the way, among the earliest groups to sound the alarm about Netanyahu, it wasn't Palestinians, it was the families of the hostages themselves, is who I'm referring to. In a Times of Israel interview, former spokesperson for the families of the hostages, Chaim Rubenstein, lamented that the Israeli government, quote, absolutely ignored them, and that there's no doubt, his words, that Netanyahu is preventing a hostage deal. He said that after an October 26th meeting with Netanyahu, they left completely disappointed because Netanyahu said, I'm quoting Chaim Rubenstein, he writes that we left the meeting very disappointed because Netanyahu talked about dismantling Hamas as the goal of the war. He didn't promise anything regarding the demand to return the hostages. We later find out that Hamas had offered on October 9th or 10th to release all the civilian hostages in exchange for the IDF to not enter the Gaza Strip, but the government rejected the offer. So this whole thing, that this whole siege is about getting the hostages back, Hamas offered that on the 9th or 10th. And we can't forget that in November, more than 100 hostages were released through diplomacy. But only a handful have been released through this incessant bombing. Yet the United States refuses to put any kind of pressure on Netanyahu in any kind of meaningful way beyond expressing their verbal concern. It's like the Susan Collins, the senator from Maine, who says she's just constantly deeply concerned and particularly concerned about Trump's extremism. This is what the U.S. government has turned into. That we're deeply concerned and we're concerned and we're very concerned, but that concern isn't resulting in any meaningful actions. We know that Netanyahu's bombing has killed numerous Israeli hostages. His military has kidnapped and killed multiple American citizens. Where is the accountability for these crimes? And this begs the next question: why is the U.S. government continuing to arm Netanyahu? I'm glad that finally Senator Bernie Sanders is introducing a resolution to stop arming Netanyahu. It's about time. But where was this the last 11 months? Despite how divided Americans are on a number of issues, and I think our country is more divided now than it's been in a long time, there is remarkable unity on demanding the U.S. government stop arming Netanyahu to bomb Gaza. The data is overwhelming. I mean, there are dozens of polls that show that at least 61% of all Americans, including Republicans, 63% of moderates, and 77% of Democrats want to stop arming Netanyahu. This is the politically smart thing for Biden to do, especially if he wants to help Harris win in November. This is what Biden needs to do. I don't understand why he's not. And by the way, it's also the morally and legally right thing to do as well. The Leahy laws are explicitly clear that the U.S. government cannot arm any nation that is credibly accused of war crimes, which Israel is. It should come as no surprise that more than 250 major global humanitarian organizations have called on the U.S. government to stop arming Netanyahu, or that 7 major American labor unions, including the UAW, the United Auto Workers, have called on the U.S. government to stop arming Netanyahu, or that major civil rights organizations like the NAACP want the U.S. government to stop arming Netanyahu. Even the United Kingdom and Canada have both begun to restrict arms to Netanyahu. And so this begs the question: how many more innocent people must die before the U.S. government stops arming Netanyahu? I mean, that's the question. How many more innocent people need to be killed before those in power decide to uphold the Leahy laws, the binding UN Security Council resolution for ceasefire and hostage release, and then actually enforce accountability for the ICC war crimes? Look, it is well documented that Hamas has repeatedly accepted the ceasefire and hostage release proposals set forth by the Israeli government, only to have the Israeli government back out of its own proposal. It's well documented. I mean, there's a Times of Israel headline, for God's sake, that says Israel condemns UN resolution in support of Israel's proposal for hostage release. This last week, the Gaza Health Ministry published a comprehensive list of every Palestinian killed in Israel's siege on Gaza. It's a 649-page, single-spaced document of murdered Palestinians. And the first 14 pages of this 649-page document, the first 14 pages is of all infants between the ages of 0 and 1 years old. It's about 50 per page. And the first 14 pages, about 700 infants between 0 and 1 years old are listed by name. The Lancet, which is the world's leading scientific medical journal, reported last June that the estimated 40,000 Palestinians killed is a gross undercount. And the actual number, conservatively, they wrote, is 186,000 deaths. 186,000. How many more innocent people, Palestinian civilians and Israeli hostages, must die before the United States government says, we're going to uphold international human rights law, American law, and basic human decency and stop arming Netanyahu? How many more must die before there's meaningful accountability via the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court? And the thing is that this is not a controversial position to take. In our sharply divided world, Americans, Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, Arabs, non-Arabs, black, white, humanity at large agree that we must enforce a permanent ceasefire, release of all hostages, a viable and sustainable two-state solution with extensive resources to build and restore Gaza. And with every passing day, new reports emerge of Netanyahu's American-made bombs killing Palestinian children, Palestinian journalists, aid workers, Israeli hostages. It's unjust, it's unsustainable, it's untenable. And with the presidential election coming up in these final few months, media is going to focus on the election. Netanyahu is going to focus on the election. He's going to avoid trying to get a deal, enabling this raging genocide funded by US tax dollars that continue. And that's why we have to keep raising our voices. That's why we have to stop arming Netanyahu. And look, I've been to occupied Palestine. I've spoken to Israeli soldiers. I've spoken to Jews and Arabs alike. And the consensus that's provided by every single person there is that don't make the mistake of thinking that the Israeli government is acting without US approval. Everything that the Israeli government is doing is with US approval. The US government could put a stop to it if they wanted to. I mean, Reagan did that, right? Reagan in 1980 or 81, when Israel was bombing Lebanon, one photo of an innocent child made the news, and Reagan called and said, stop the bombing immediately, and within 20 minutes, the war was over. That's all it took. Reagan said, I don't know, I had that kind of power, but he did it anyway. Why is President Biden to the right of Ronald Reagan? And the thing is, guys, you got to understand that even if you're so callous that you don't care at all about Palestinians or Arabs or Muslims or people in Lebanon, you have to understand that Gaza, Lebanon, it's become a playground, a testing ground for the military to see what works. And this latest story, this horrifying story that the Israeli government created thousands of pagers with tiny bombs inside of them and then had them explode. And now in 2 ways, they've killed more than 35 people, including at least a dozen children. How is this not an act of terrorism? Applied in any other scenario. If Hamas created a shipment of cell phones, sent it into Israel, saying that we're only targeting IDF soldiers, not knowing if that's actually true or not, and then detonated them at some given time whenever they wanted to, we absolutely would call that an act of terrorism. Because that's what it is. Indiscriminate bombing and killing of civilians and children is absolutely an act of terrorism. Why is it instead being celebrated as this, really based act of military genius, masterful gambit? It's nonsense. And the reality is that with the testing of these weapons overseas, it's instructive, it's frighteningly instructive what the US government is allowing to happen under its watch with our tax dollars. Because the fact is that whatever it allows to happen to folks overseas, it can conceive of doing to its own citizens here as well. You really think it's only going to happen over there? You really think that it wouldn't also be used on us as well? And so that's why I say that even if you have such a calloused heart that you don't care about Palestinians or Muslims or Israeli hostages, if you don't care about any of those people, at least care about yourself. And on principle say, yeah, this is a bad thing. This is not good for us. Now, I'm confident that the vast majority of folks out there, especially folks listening to the show, have compassion for others, for Muslims and Jews and Israelis and Palestinians and Lebanese. I'm confident you have compassion for them, which is why I need you to raise your voice and let your electeds know that this is absolutely wrong and it cannot be justified under any circumstance. It's condemnable without exception. This is one reason why I was a vocal critic of Obama's drone program, Bush's drone program and Obama's drone program, and the expansion of the drone program under Obama from Bush. Because guess what? Then Donald Trump came to power and he expanded the drone program even more. And yes, Donald Trump's drone program killed American citizens too. He drone striked American citizens. People don't realize this, but he did. Now, do you really think that if he comes back into power, he's not going to look at what Netanyahu did with these tiny bombs and pagers and say, you know what? That's not a bad idea for me to use here in the US as well. The guy said he wants to be a dictator on day one. The guy said he wants to terminate parts of the Constitution or all the Constitution. You really don't think he would say, it worked pretty well for Netanyahu. Maybe I should try that over here as well. That's why this stuff is so dangerous, guys. That's why we cannot allow injustice like this to occur. This is why Dr. King said that injustice anywhere, the threat to justice everywhere. And in this global village, in this global humanity in which we live, that's the reality that we have to take this for. I mean, think about this, and I'll close with this, and then we'll go to break, and when we come back, we'll bring on Judge John Anderson to talk about his campaign. Excuse me. But think about this. The FBI, because I keep hearing people say, well, they were targeting Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, and therefore, you shouldn't affiliate with terrorist organizations if you don't want to get killed. Okay, let's go with that theory. The FBI reports that white supremacists are the greatest terror threat to the United States. There's hundreds of white supremacist organizations in the United States right now. Imagine a foreign nation saying, you know what? These white supremacists are pretty scary. They've committed horrific acts of violence, cross burnings, lynchings, bombings. Look at Oklahoma City. Look at the attempted kidnapping of Governor Whitmer. Look at the international white supremacist organizations. And the USA has a ton of these organizations. So what we're going to do is we are going to manufacture tiny bombs to put inside cell phones and pagers and sell them to these known white supremacists. And then at a time of our choosing, we're going to go ahead and detonate those bombs. And if it happens to kill some American kids, so what? Imagine how horrifying that would be. Name me one politician who's right now defending Netanyahu's acts in Lebanon who would say, yeah, I've got no problem with a foreign nation doing that in the US. Name me one. Can anyone listening honestly say that they would have no problem with a foreign nation coming into the US, say, hey, we got to take out these white supremacist terrorists, and here's how we're going to do it? Of course you wouldn't be okay with that. Of course you would condemn the killing of civilians, of children. Of course you would be enraged at the sovereignty of the United States being ignored to allow this kind of horrific act to happen. That same rage is what you should have in this situation, especially that much more because it's being funded by US tax dollars as well. That's why we're continuing to create awareness on what's happening. That's why I'm continuing to ask for your support as well. I appreciate you guys listening, but share this content as well. And if you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can continue to create advocacy around this space. Things will get better when we make them get better, and that's by being active and organized. That's why I have leaders like Senator Nabilah Islam on the show. That's why I'm going to have Judge John Anderson come on after this break. But the bottom line is this: we cannot be bystanders in our democracy. So the late great John Lewis said that democracy is an act. It's not a state, it's an act. And every generation must play its part in upholding that democracy. All right, thanks for letting me rant. As always, when we come back from break, we'll welcome Judge John Anderson, running for appellate court in Illinois, a phenomenal human being, a phenomenal judge, and just somebody that I'm so glad to bring on and introduce to you. His website is judgejohnanderson.com. Make sure you go on there and donate if you can. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. When we come back, we'll have Judge John Anderson. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I'm extraordinarily proud to invite our next guest on the show. Judge John Anderson is someone I've only had the pleasure of knowing for about 3 or 4 years, but he's absolutely one of the best human beings I know. He is running for appellate court in Illinois. He's got a brilliant record. If I go through his entire bio and all of his law degrees, it'll take up the entire 10 minutes that we have with him. So I just kind of want to dive into it. He's running right here in Illinois. He's be the first person elected to the appellate court from Will County, if and when he's elected. And he's facing an opponent who was a former clerk for Justice Thomas. Yes, the same Justice Thomas whose wife Ginny helped with the insurrection, the same Justice Thomas who has been found to have taken bribes effectively. Those are my words. And the same Justice Thomas who refuses to recuse himself. And the reason why I bring this up is because Judge Anderson's opponent brags incessantly about clerking for the Supreme Court, but doesn't have the integrity to mention that he clerked for Justice Thomas. And so it speaks to the importance, and we're seeing this with, Roe v. Wade being overturned, and with horrible decisions on voting rights, and with, presidential immunity. It speaks to the importance of having good judges. And that's why I wanted to bring Judge John Anderson on to talk about his campaign and ask you all to support him. Judge Anderson, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I want the listeners to get a feel for your background and who you are, because I think when we think about judges, we think about people who always had it made or never had to go through the struggle that the rest of us mere mortals have to go through. And one thing I love about your story is your journey of struggle to get here is powerful. And it speaks to not only your resiliency, but the importance of second chances. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I do come from a pretty humble background. My dad was a landscaper and my mom was a school bus driver. And they did their best to make ends meet, but they were ultimately not successful. They lost their home to the bank in a foreclosure lawsuit. And so I was homeless for a while. I was also a pretty bad student. I had to go to summer school every year, including the summer after I should have graduated. And I was able to live, thankfully, I had a friend who let me live on his couch in a cockroach-infested apartment in Joliet. So I at least had a roof over my head. And a tragic occurrence happened in my family. My uncle was murdered in an act of gun violence, and that caused me to turn my life around. And then ultimately I went back to school, and ultimately his killer was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And that's why I decided to go to law school.
You've been a circuit judge since 2010. You were named Judicial Officer of the Year in 2018. You got the under 40 attorneys to watch back in 2010. And I think you're the only judge rated as, is it highly recommended? What was the rating that you received?
Yeah, judges are hard to vote for. And so the Illinois State Bar Association does a deep dive, and they do really a pretty detailed investigation into people who are running for judicial office. And they offer 3 ratings, either not recommended, recommended, or highly recommended. And I received a highly recommended rating. I'm the only one in the race to get that.
That's fantastic. And so let's talk a bit about your judicial philosophy, because we've seen, there's a lot of talk about the Supreme Court and how it's a right-wing MAGA, a kind of extremist Supreme Court. And I want to be sensitive to our listeners to say these are my words. I don't want to attribute anything to Judge Anderson. But what is your judicial philosophy? How do we ensure we're electing good judges? What should voters be looking for when they're voting for judges?
Well, I mean, primarily you want judges who will be fair and will follow the law. But I think that unfortunately courts in America right now are being used to attack and undermine our rights. And I think courts are the last line of defense in protecting these rights. So things like reproductive rights, the right to vote, the right to love who you want to love, even the right to read the books you want to read, those are all under attack. And I think we need to elect good judges that will protect those rights under the law.
How do you frame your understanding of the law and the Constitution? Because we could talk to your opponent and he would probably say something to the effect of, well, the Constitution justifies stripping down Roe v. Wade. It justifies stripping down voting rights. It justifies, depending on how extreme you want to go with some of these right-wing judges, undoing Brown v. Board. What kind of questions should voters ask of judges to ensure that their platform is one based on justice? I mean, yours is. I've studied your platform. It's absolutely based on justice, and that's why I'm excited to have you on here. But you said it really beautifully, Judge Anderson, that the judges are hard to vote for because the information is so hard to find. So what should voters be doing to vet judges to make sure they're voting for the right person?
Well, I think, again, the Illinois State Bar Association does a good job of vetting for us voters. And I think you look at the ratings that they've put out. I think you want to know what's in a judge's heart. There are judges out there that are very political and I think are very activist, and not in a good way. So, I mentioned how I was homeless once, how I was a poor student once, and I turned my life around. And those experiences taught me empathy, integrity, and the value of hard work. I am a person who I think can relate to people. I understand the struggles people face. No one wants to be judged on their worst day. And
Sure.
often, when people come into court, they're having their worst day. So I think it's important to have empathy for human beings. And I also think it's important that we give everyone a fair shake, not just those who are wealthy and can afford a lawyer. I think we need to make the court system a little more user-friendly for people who can't afford an attorney.
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Judge John Anderson, running for appellate court in Illinois. And I want to restate that point you made, that nobody wants to be judged on their worst day, but when they're in court, often they're having their worst day. That's a profound statement, because you're right. Then you have, as judge, a lot of power over how their day or how their future goes, and empathy is the right balance there. And I didn't mention it earlier, but just to kind of list off some of his credentials: a bachelor's from Illinois State University, master's from University of Illinois in Springfield, MBA from Notre Dame, JD from University of Illinois at Chicago, and LLM from Duke Law School. So a learned man indeed. And, I find it telling that your opponent isn't actually debating the issues that matter. He's attacking you for speeding tickets you got 25 years ago. If you're listening right now, raise your hand if you've ever received a speeding ticket, and think about how ludicrous it would be for someone to attack you on that 25 years later. And so I think if people see those attacks, know that it's weak and it's the reflection of a scared man. But in our last 2 minutes here, Judge Anderson, I'd love for you to share, how can folks support your campaign? I mean, I think making a donation is a good step, but beyond that, what else can folks do to get involved with your campaign? How can we make sure we elect a good judge like you to the Illinois Appellate Court?
Well, first of all, Qasim, you mentioned donations, and I am not allowed as a judge to solicit or accept donations myself. We, under Illinois law and the rules that govern judges, we set up a committee to do that. So I can't get too far into that. But
So I will say on my own behalf, not being asked by Judge Anderson, but completely of my own volition, make sure you contribute to Judge John Anderson's campaign. And I think you can do that at judgejohnanderson.com. You can find out more over there how to do that, but judgejohnanderson.com. Outside of donations, how else can folks get involved with your campaign?
Well, anyone who wants to support the campaign can go to our website, and there's some materials on there that you can share. There are videos that talk about my life story. There are videos that talk about my charitable work and work that I do for the community. I think anytime you can get to know a judge on a personal level, admittedly through videos, but I mean, you get to know me as a person. And there's a video on my judicial philosophy. For example, I talk about how I don't wear a blue robe, I don't wear a red robe, I wear a black robe, because justice should be colorblind, and we should apply the law equally to everyone, regardless of their wealth, their social status, and so on. So go on my website, learn more about me, share it with your friends. Just tell your friends, put up a campaign sign in your yard. That multiplier effect, when you tell your friends and ask them to tell their friends, that multiplier effect is real.
Judge John Anderson, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Qasim. I appreciate the opportunity to say hello.
That was Judge John Anderson, somebody I deeply care about, somebody I deeply admire. Go to his website, judgejohnanderson.com, and throw some coin his way if you want a phone bank. And if you're local, come knock doors, because this is the kind of person that we need in the halls of power, especially with our increasingly corrupt judicial system. Getting a noble, thoughtful person like Judge John Anderson is going to be a critical step forward. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media at Qasim Rashid across all platforms. You have my promise to continue to advance a show that builds on compassion, on justice, and on accountability for those in power. If you're listening on Substack, please do go ahead and hit that subscribe button so we can continue to bring on great guests and have great content. We've got a great lineup for next week as well. Be sure to tune in, same time, same place at 10 a.m. Eastern on Sunday on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.